Eric Hecker, great to see you in the studio, in the flesh. Great to see you, my friend.
Thank you very much for having me, Clayton. Very happy to be here.
We've talked over the years, and I've always been fascinated about Antarctica. I think we brought you first to our audience to talk about, you blew the whistle on what was happening at the South Pole Station in Antarctica. You worked there. What you saw is shocking, and I think shocked a lot of people. People wanted to kind of come out and discredit you and throw water on your story. But you, from the very beginning, were calling attention to the incredible weapons, the directed energy weapons that we had at our disposal at the South Pole Station. And now it seems like you've been vindicated, because a lot of people, maybe in the UFO community or otherwise, were slamming you and going after you and all of that. And now the Trump administration came out just recently and admitted that we have weapons that can manipulate space and time. Do you feel vindicated?
I absolutely do. I'm pleasantly surprised that the conversation is finally going in this direction after great effort. So I'm very happy as to what I see showing up in the headlines now, and I look forward to people engaging these concepts, hopefully.
Have you ever drank a cup of coffee that makes you feel younger? 1775's Rejuvenate coffee is a bold, dark roast that's infused with CAAKG. It's the same compound studied to reverse biological age by up to 8 years. Wait a minute, so I can literally get younger while drinking coffee? It fuels your cells, sharpens your mind, supports long-term strength, all without popping a cabinet full of supplements or drinking swamp water in a bottle. This isn't lab junk, no mystery blends, just real single-origin, small-batch coffee roasted weekly with one powerful, proven ingredient. And here's the best part. When you buy from 1775 Coffee, you're backing free speech, freedom of choice, and a company that backs the same creators and values that you do. No corporate overlords, just great products made for people who still believe in something real. Go to 1775coffee.com and grab their anti-aging longevity roast and use the code REDACTED for 15% off. You can feel sharper, stronger, younger, and know that you're fueling the companies that actually give a damn about your health and your freedom.
Maybe you can walk us back a little bit here. When you worked at the South Pole Station, what were you doing there, and what did you see? And how big of a weapon are we talking about here? And what are its strengths, and what are governments using it for?
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
Basically, my role was I provided maintenance to the facility. In that capacity, I had extreme access to everything that was going on. As I disclosed in Washington, D.C. as a whistleblower, these research projects are actually directed energy weapons systems. I've been trying to get people to pay attention to the high level of technology that's being hidden from us. And there's only a fistful of people like yourself that are willing to engage these topics and consider what might be being hidden from us. In regards to the technology that I found down there, the capacity to generate earthquakes is one of the things going on. Earthquake induction is a very referenceable science that has a lot of money being invested into it for the past couple of decades. So the Christchurch earthquakes that occurred in February of 2011, 2 of them are the responsibility of this equipment that I identified at the South Pole Station.
Is the New Zealand government aware that this was caused by the equipment and the machines at the South Pole Station? As the New Zealand government demanded retribution, said, you guys literally destroyed one of our cities. I mean, has there been any, or are they just sort of hands off?
Not to my knowledge. Nobody from the New Zealand government has ever reached out to me. Technically, I have been interviewed by other podcasters and such from New Zealand, Australia, folks that are in the vicinity and question, American tactics, but there does not seem to have been any response from the government.
And I understand it was an accident. When they did the testing of the equipment, it was not meant to happen?
That's what I was initially told, but I question the veracity of that as well, with consideration to an email that was apparently released or leaked from Hillary Clinton that was shortly after the event in Christchurch. And I'm paraphrasing, but she had written something to the point of, great that the earthquake occurred and on cue. That was the weird part to me. So it was like,
And on cue.
And on cue.
Man, that woman, how many, the body count is large for that woman. So can maybe just to paint a picture when you're at the South Pole Station, because it's very hard for many of us to wrap our heads around.
I appreciate that.
Of being in Antarctica. So maybe walk us through, like, when you arrive there, what does this facility look like? What do these weapons look like? What part of the building are the weapons in? Are they underground? Is there a big control center? Is there, I picture like a Dr. Evil just sort of sitting there on a throne, you know, now launch it against Christ Church. But can you walk us through exactly what it looks like? And
Absolutely. The elevated station was a relatively new structure when I arrived. It was going from construction to operations and maintenance. And I mean, everything does kind of look somewhat spacey when you're in that environment. Like it's like being on Hoth in Star Wars.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the backdrop. You know, things look newfangled and high-end construction because they have to fight the elements so much so. And the elements are ruthless. I mean, when you talk about cold and wind and lack of oxygen, I mean, you're heartily taxed just doing anything in that environment. But with that being said, upon, you know, initial pass through and stuff, and to the general public who simply just goes from compartment to compartment and is limited access, it looks very benign. And yes, the vast majority of the functioning components are embedded in the ice. So there's really nothing to see. The DOMs, 5,160 of them, basketball-sized type items, they're embedded in the ice in a 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer array. So you can't see it.
DOMs.
The DOM's about a basketball-sized device that's embedded for the primary purpose of the detecting of neutrinos, but then the secondary aspect is the ability to also transmit, which adds up to very high power levels and in the form of what appears to be a phased array transmitter. Again, plenty of stuff referenceable on this. Basically, the IceCube neutrino detector array is like another level of magnitude of what we know the HAARP array systems to be. So the HAARP array sits on the surface of the Earth. It has length and width and is a phased array in and of itself. This just adds depth to it. So it just gives it more magnitudes of capacity for whatever they're doing with it. And whatever they are doing with it is going to get worse because they're currently slated to make that facility, the neutrino detector array, 10 times bigger.
Where? There?
Right there. That facility is going to be expanded upon.
Now, when you were there, you were working for a defense contractor.
Yes, sir.
Raytheon?
Raytheon Polar Services was the subsidiary under Raytheon.
Why does a defense contractor need to be at the South Pole Station?
One of my biggest questions is it goes from Raytheon to Lockheed Martin to PA. Like, why is it always people that manufacture and operate weapons systems seem to get these contracts? There's plenty of other contractors out there that provide the necessary services, but don't make weapons. I don't know why they wouldn't get the contract.
Fascinating. So now they're going to expand this size 10 times larger.
That's my understanding.
And they already can carry out earthquakes in New Zealand and other spots. First of all, do we know of any other instances besides Christchurch?
My understanding was that, and I did discuss this on the Patrick Bet-David show, there was a circumstance, well, this is a while ago now, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, that President Biden at the time had made some sort of untoward threat towards Turkey, that if they didn't, you know, acquiesce to whatever his decision was, that he'd hit them with an earthquake. I had seen this clip before, that it is extremely hard to find, but it did occur, and they did get hit with an earthquake.
And Biden tends to say things and not think about them, and they tend to be true, you know, and we, whether it's overthrowing a government in Ukraine, you know, whether it's letting slip, you know, that we're going to destroy your Nord Stream pipeline. So I wouldn't be surprised that he came out and said
I think Biden's slips of the tongue involve more than ice cream cones.
Yes, I think they do. It's so disturbing. So 10 times larger, 10 times larger than what's currently there. So for those who are uninitiated, and I have to plead ignorance on this up until just a few years ago, up until I met you, started really diving into this research, started studying what was happening with the climate engineering, like our friend Dane Wigington, and what's been happening with chemtrails and all of these other things. I was pretty ignorant on it, and it sounded like too out there.
Oh, I totally get it.
That our government is manipulating our weather. They're manipulating climate. They're manipulating ocean levels. They're manipulating lakes and all of this. It sounded crazy until you realize they've got all these HAARP arrays all across the United States. What are they doing? What are these HAARP arrays?
And they're around the world. We're not the only ones with them.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so this is where I get into the conversation of weapons of warfare in a modern age that, you know, it's not the conventional pull a trigger and you know, a bullet comes out of the barrel. This is modern weaponry in a new battlefield. And unfortunately, I think we, the people of this planet, are currently all caught in the crossfire. It's not the walking wounded of old in the conventional warfare where, you know, the battlefield is over there and we send our troops over there and it's an attrition of resources. The first one to run out of resources loses in that, you know, logistics chain of the battlefield being over there. I think they've circumnavigated the relocation of the battlefield. I think they no longer bother putting the you know, troops in uniform and sending them over there. And now the same activity, which is effectively, you know, outlasting the resources or infrastructure of your enemy, I think they're just attacking them directly now instead of, you know, indirectly through the battlefield being remotely located. We're just going directly after resources. We're going directly after infrastructure, and we don't see it going on as people in the battlefield contemporarily.
Do we tell them that we're doing that? I mean, you know, or they could just think it's an earthquake. You know, to me, in a battle, you're letting them know your strength, right? You're letting them know that we're a strong superpower. And so if you do this, we've got President Trump the other day just said we have these incredible weapons.
Correct.
You know, so is that we're not going to tell you what these weapons are, but if you mess with us, you may end up with a city that's been destroyed.
Correct. And I think these are the types of conversations that, you know, occur publicly where there's a face to the conversation. You know, at face value, it means this. There's other people paying attention to those conversations. And I think just like the systems at South Pole Station, there's primary, secondary, tertiary. So I believe there's other people that listen to those statements that might have been, you know, pre-told that, you know, pay attention when President Trump says this means that. You know, I think there's a lot of these communications that happen publicly that we, the people, don't realize that there's other aspects to the information being relayed.
Let's talk about UFO disclosure a little bit more. Like in the beginning, we talked about, you know, you were one of the first people really talking about these directed energy weapons, what you saw, but earthquake weapons, and people were slamming you for it. And there was a lot of pushback, I think, in the UFO community. It's so divisive. It's crazy.
Absolutely.
You know, like, oh my God. You want to talk about people getting upset about politics? Forget that. Just go into like UFO Twitter and or UFO Reddit, and people like, oh, this guy's a liar. This guy, he doesn't know what he's talking about, back and forth. And I think now in many ways you've been vindicated on this, so good for you. But where do you see the disclosure movement going within Congress right now and the Pentagon?
Ooh, I am not content with what's going on currently with disclosure in regards to our government. I do not believe that anything has positively occurred with the information that I transferred to the Senate Intelligence Committee. I'm cognizant that AARO is completely lying about everything that happened with the June 23 disclosure.
How so?
Here's a perfect example. You are well aware of the information that I had presented publicly even prior to going there. There would be no reason for me to withhold any of that information now getting into the skiff at AARO. I can only assure you, because no one else was present, I relayed to them that myself and my crew were negatively impacted from our proximity to these directed energy weapons platforms and are suffering Havana syndrome symptoms. I clarified this. This is part of my gripe and why I speak publicly, to get justice for myself and my crew. It's part of it. When AARO gave their summary report to the public, they stated with great clarity that they are aware of reports of victims of Havana syndrome symptoms from every single continent except for Antarctica. I was thoroughly floored.
Even though your testimony is there.
Even though I went to them to testify to that fact.
Talk about what symptoms you've experienced since then and what your crew has experienced.
Because of the situation, right? Because these people, myself included, are targeted, I like to just simply lay the list on the table without allowing the people that are targeting us to know how accurate their targeting is.
I see.
So I'll just agree that I suffer from the list. The people that I know are suffering symptoms from the list, but I'd rather just leave it at that.
What is Havana syndrome?
Havana syndrome is effectively the wounds of war from modern weaponry known as directed energy weapons. So on the list are things like mental fatigue, issues with mental capacity, voice to skull. The Department of Defense employees where they like to use the term like hearing peculiar sounds. That's the cover, you know, hearing voices in your head. And
then you're crazy, right?
Right. So nobody wants to say these things because it sounds terrible. But if this technology is being applied to all of us in mass, consider it. At some point, we need to have some very serious conversations about what the capabilities of modern technology are and the implications.
Do you think that they're using it in mass?
Absolutely.
On the American populace or certain cities? Or
on the world. I believe that what we just went through with the COVID debacle is a perfect example of the application of this technology to move the people in a direction. I don't know about you, but during the COVID debacle, I kept hearing from when in the history of the world has there been precedent where the whole world agreed on anything?
Yeah.
But during COVID, we all somehow agreed a mask is cool. Right?
Well, yeah.
Everyone agreed a mask was cool for the most part, right? Reluctantly agreed, but did it anyhow. And I would suggest that if we look at the broad spectrum of all the different components of technology that are around that can be mated together, hypothetically speaking, you put a drone up, it has directed energy weapons capacity to make the connection between that technology and your head during the COVID debacle. And the mission, apply some AI, make a connection, data mine, find out what's Clayton's weakness. What is the thing? We effectively want everybody to say, I will wear a mask because, and then find the weak point to fill in the blank. And then once that can be figured out, now relay that back. So now voice to skull technology would tolerate an ability to mimic your voice, play it back to you, but with the statement, I will wear a mask because, and I can just keep doing that and looking and transmitting. And if you don't know thyself or in your own thoughts, I mean, if you're sitting there considering, should I wear a mask? Shouldn't I wear a mask? Every time you find yourself at a fork in the road in life, you have a conversation in your head. What should I do? And multiple Claytons then engage and make a decision. What if I can intrude on that process with an invasive version that's in the communication? How would you know the difference if you didn't know the technology existed? Wouldn't I be able to wield a serious amount of power over you?
I mean, is this like, you know, MK Ultra levels of stuff? I mean,
this is years of research and development in consciousness, technology, and the intermingling of them. This is where we are today.
And you believe that while you were there, they were using it on you, or it was as a byproduct of you being there?
I believe it's a byproduct of proximity, first and foremost. And then I have concerns that if we were an offensive facility where there are people working defensively against us and hitting us with their equipment. These are all fair questions.
Right. It's unbelievable. We first heard the stories about like the U.S. Embassy in Havana, and that's where it's being used on a small level. I've had whistleblowers have come to me saying, you know, people don't understand the massive scale of Havana syndrome, and they're getting it all wrong. Is this where do you think people are getting Havana syndrome wrong? Maybe the characterization of it.
The characterization.
Like, I think the picture is that, it's somebody in a van sitting outside shooting some sort of a thing at a building, and it's this small, and that's it, and we're just trying to make you a little nuts.
Fair enough. I think a lot of people think of it as it needs to be something like line of sight.
Yeah.
Or like Elon Musk, I think I feel like the whole Neuralink is just a cover story to make us believe that the connection can't occur unless you have the hardware.
Right.
But we already know the frequencies. We already know the signals. They can already be listened to, and they can already be transmitted to. We already have this science. We don't need Neuralink.
Where does 5G come into this?
Ooh, that's an interesting one because there's a big debate. I believe absolutely that 5G can be used detrimentally to people.
In the same way that Havana syndrome, the same way it's being targeted?
I do believe that it would have again, the umbrella term, directed energy weapons system. It's manifold capacity. I wish I knew the entirety of the list, but it appears to be one of these things that, similar to the South Pole Station, they roll it out with its conveniences and its primary purpose. But we have to delve into what can it also do.
Like a byproduct that they didn't anticipate. So when we look at HAARP and these HAARP arrays, being able to, you and I have talked previously about being able to manipulate and create hurricanes or direct hurricanes in a certain pathway.
Increase the power.
And why certain cities are completely untouched, where there's a HAARP array nearby, or, all of that, right? So am I wrong about that? Or
no, it seems to be the case is that, if people pay attention to the energies in weather systems, there's a lot of people that find, these next-rad radar systems also seem to be able to apply their energies to either enhance or redirect storms or stall them. I mean, I don't know if you remember the news for 9/11 event. Do you remember the weather in New York just before 9/11? There was a hurricane inbound to Manhattan, and then it stalled off the coast. And stayed there so that it was crystal clear for 9/11. And then it actually went back out to sea. It changed direction.
Huh. Well, it's remarkable. I didn't, or what happened in North Carolina, what happened with these recent rounds of storms, and you can see unbelievable weather data about these things going in directions that they would never go.
Yeah, the weather's doing things that it would never have done before. Nobody could have predicted the North Carolina event because according to weathermen, that's not possible.
So that's one application, is the controlling of weather, manipulation of that. What's the good application of these HAARP arrays? Like the people that would work for them or work on them, what would they say? Oh no, that's conspiracy theory stuff over there, manipulating weather. What we're doing with the HAARP arrays is this.
Well, according to the HAARP arrays for ionospheric research, very benign stuff. This is it's ionospheric research. What they leave out of the statement, technically, I mean, everybody's concerned about global warming. How many people are aware that another term for HAARP is an ionospheric heater? It heats the atmosphere.
They're using the HAARP arrays to heat the atmosphere.
That's one of the science aspects, is they actually heat the atmosphere, and it can make a bubble. So picture the ionosphere being a sphere to begin with. But then when you heat a particular area, it makes almost like a spherical tumor. And then off of that, they say that they can bounce signals through that bubble, okay? So now the research I've done is what they say is that the atmospheric heating to create the bubble takes a bunch of time. But once it's there with tension, so to say, when they release the energy that built it, apparently that ionospheric bubble snaps back into place and technically exerts energy.
Like some sort of a big...
just a snapback.
Yeah.
That it takes a while for it to come this way, but that the return is rapid and provides an energy release. So these, you have to look at the world differently.
It reminds me of those things as a kid that I had, the little pop-ups. They were like the rubber pops, and you'd push the one side, you'd set it on a table.
Yes.
And then suddenly, after 5-10 seconds, it'd go...
Correct. The rapid release of that concave aspect has energy output.
Now, that's the application of HAARP. What was the application of the neutrino detector in the South Pole Station, far more powerful, using these basketball domes, as you said, in the ground. What would they say is like the practical application of that?
For
like on the press release.
For discovering interactions between neutrinos and the nucleus of the ice molecules that they're embedded in. That when that reaction occurs, the nucleus and the neutrino disintegrate. They make a blue flash of Cherenkov radiation. That's what's observed. And basically then they utilize that to get a trajectory from where the neutrino came from.
Now, I've learned from you that in many ways, this is an air traffic control center for interstellar travel, which may just blow people's minds, right? Well, that's a big jump from just talking about weather, but it's really like an air traffic control center to monitor aircraft out in space.
What we're finding in the technological communities is that these highly advanced aircraft, whatever you want to call them, have exotic propulsion that emit neutrinos. So it stands to logic and reason that, you know, if you and I and all these people, all these factions have all this secret air traffic, you'd need a facility to monitor the traffic. It's just reasonable. So to me, it makes it very simple that if this equipment exists in the air and the atmosphere and is moving on and off Earth, they're going to want to be able to track it. Now, historically, there's a gentleman by the name of Lloyd Berkner, who was part of the original Byrd expedition. Very important character. Lloyd Berkner was who Kennedy was going to meet and speak with on a very important day when he was stopped from going to meet and speak with someone.
What?
He was going to meet Lloyd Berkner.
In Dallas.
Correct. Talk to Dark Journalist about this, DJ. He's the only person I know that seems to be covering the Antarctic topic correctly. But with that being said, when Byrd went to Antarctica and came back, I'm sorry, not Byrd, Berkner. Berkner came back and requested funding from the American government to start a program to observe the activities of things coming in and out of the atmosphere. They responded with giving him the funding that he was looking for, but then through the NSF and such, they started what they called the geophysical year, which is a very interesting term. And then through the geophysical year, all the nations got together and started the Antarctic Treaty. And we got the United States Antarctic Program. And we got what is presented as science and research, but it's the same funding that Berkner requested for observation of the exact same things I'm suggesting are what's really going on.
So he was meant to meet with him, killed, obviously, assassinated. What do you think would have come of that meeting?
I think there was actually going to be a big disclosure event. I think Kennedy wanted to let the cat out of the bag as far as all what we were warned about, you know, beware the dangers of the military-industrial complex. And I think Kennedy was going to do his best effort to break that open publicly. And I think it was the military-industrial complex that took him out. The aerospace companies, former, you know, Operation Paperclip folk, you know.
Right.
I mean, heaven forbid you kick the shins of a Nazi.
Can't do that anymore. No, you have to invite him to your Canadian Parliament now these days. That's what you have to do. Why Antarctica?
Remoteness. So it's completely secure from anybody that doesn't have the logistics line to get in and out. Mother Nature secures your borders. Second to that, it suits what they're calling the primary purpose for this stuff. You know, off-world studies of the cosmos and things like that. And then additionally, I actually believe from my research that there's something to be said. If you're going to be entering or exiting the atmosphere of, say, the Earth, the Moon, or any of these things in our solar system, it appears for some reason that it's easier to do that at the South Pole of said body. So in regards to the air traffic control capacity, I think there's something blatant about that location, with the presumption that if there are things that aren't ours, that aren't from here, that for some reason they will still follow that reason and logic that entering and exiting from the southern pole provides benefit.
Did you ever see any of these craft when you were there?
I did see something that I consider a UFO that at the time I thought was a meteor, but it was massive. I could see it was flaming. And I had never at the time heard anybody describe a UFO that looked like what I saw. But since then, I have heard other reports of people describing the same thing I saw. And the thing that I saw went from horizon to horizon, parallel to the surface, and didn't deviate or come down. So to me, it very much looked like a controlled flight path.
How big was it?
Huge, huge. It's very hard to say because I didn't have a lot of reference points. I mean, from my perspective, it appeared to be about halfway down from the, the top of the sky to the horizon. It almost looked like when the moon is really full.
Yeah.
But now just picture the moon shooting from horizon to horizon.
Holy smokes.
Huge. Yeah, that's what I said. It was unbelievable. It's hard to describe.
It was fiery?
It was flaming. The ball itself was flaming. It had a trail behind it that was still flaming. And then beyond that was a long section of smoke. And then this whole arrangement just shot from horizon to horizon in what seemed like seconds. And again, not deviating down.
In your work now that you've left there and you've been trying to educate all of us about this, the folks that you've worked with, have other people come forward to you that have also worked there and confirmed, told you that they've put other pieces of this puzzle together for you?
Absolutely. There are folks that I would say are in the program that support the program.
Right.
And you're a piece of garbage and that's not what's going on. And, I can appreciate that those people exist, but there's plenty of other people in the program that have been used and abused by Raytheon and military industrial complex contractors from the time this place opened till now. And I absolutely have crossed paths with people randomly in airports. I travel a lot. I talk to people. People do reach out to me. A lot of the things that I've experienced in the past, stuff that happened to me in school, I've had former classmates reach out to me and say, do it, get them, So yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of people that want to see me succeed in getting this information out there. And a lot of them do happen to be former Antarctic crew.
Do you think there are other massive, like what we saw at the South Pole Station that they're building 10 times the size of it is now? Is there one in Nevada? Is there one in Hawaii? Is there one anywhere else in the United States other than South Pole Station?
There can't possibly be anything under the Denver International Airport.
Oh, don't say that. Really? Well, I know so many people talk about the Denver area and Colorado Springs
They'll eventually stop taking dirt out of the ground from the Denver International Airport, right?
Is that what they're doing?
Have they ever stopped from the time they started building?
That's true. I don't think they have. And I've heard about the massive tunnel complexes underneath there.
Yeah.
It's a perfect cover. It's a perfect cover to have a massive airport where people are coming in constantly. There's trucks. There's all sorts of, you can just go to work that day.
That airport is one of the furthest airports from the city that it supports that I've ever seen. It's quite a drive from Denver to the Denver airport.
You sound like this is an informed, this is like an informed opinion.
I'm in the trades. I mean, I kind of understand infrastructure, proximities, how challenging it is to, instead of building your airport next to where your infrastructure is, let's just move it way out there because that's easier.
So Denver International Airport, I've heard of massive cave structures, underground tunnels and systems, that massive, huge cities, underground cities. Have you heard similar?
I've absolutely heard that. I don't doubt that at all. I mean, we've all seen these, the United States Air Force tunnel boring equipment. I mean, because that makes sense.
Yeah. We'll drop a picture in here of that, because I remember when I was years ago, 10, 15 years ago, when I first saw these giant Air Force boring machines. Why the hell does the Air Force need massive tunneling equipment? And then Elon Musk launches the Boring Company, to build massive tunnel infrastructure. So what's going on underneath the United States to me is one of the most fascinating stories right now, and I want to dive more deeply into it. But besides the Denver International Airport, where do you think we have? We have the Air Force Training Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado. but other spots that might be of
How about Montauk, Long Island seems to have a rich history of subterfuge.
Right.
Brookhaven National Labs, Shoreham, Long Island, had the world's only privately owned nuclear power plant.
Dulce, New Mexico.
There you go. I mean, there's so many lists of places that are extremely questionable. One of the things that I've learned in my experience is that a lot of these things are in plain sight and we just don't know. Long Island was very much the hub of the manufacturing of the military industrial equipment for the wartime periods, and they had Nike nuclear-tipped missiles all over Long Island, next to people's homes. Did they tell the locals that's what it was?
Of course. Yeah, of course.
No, they said it's a Air National Guard Reserve training facility.
Yeah. Wow.
So these things, I mean, people have to realize, like, if you want to have a, super secret stuff and you want to staff it, you can't move it out into the middle of nowhere for your enemy to start tracking. Oh, here we have 300 people that go out into the middle of nowhere every day and then go back.
Right.
So you have to cover all of these things. This is engineering plausible deniability for both the population and your enemy.
So it makes sense then, right? They maybe learned their lesson with Area 51. All these people have to go out there on a regular basis. They leave from Las Vegas in those secretive aircraft. People are tracking them, following them. That's a problem.
Right.
And they have to live there on base for a long time, periods of a long time. Have it at the Denver International Airport where no one's going to notice.
Yeah, people come and go. If you put up barbed wire fences and signs that say super secret facility and you have armed guards working the perimeter, you've just shined a spotlight on the place you're trying to hide.
You're blowing my mind. Next time I go to the Denver International Airport, I'm going to be looking for some secret doors and walking around there. I'll get you out of here on this, Eric. What do you hope will happen next with this information that you're trying to educate people about? Where do you want this to go?
I hope that people start to really, truly realize that what's going on in disclosure contemporary with these current batch of whistleblowers is running around saying, we don't have this technology. No one has this technology. We're working on shooting down the UFOs to figure out what's going on. That's the cover story. There certainly is UFO activity going on, but the vast majority of what we're seeing on this planet that's being observed is just straight up monopolized technology that's in the hands of a few and completely unregulated. That's where we're getting these BS cover stories and all these current iterations. This is why I know that, I went to Arrow. I know who went to Arrow. I see the new Arrow people that are regurgitating stuff that was handed to them. This is a show. This is stagecraft. I mean, you've gone through this, things can be presented. Whether we want to script and write a show and present it right here, or if we want to expound on that and script and write a show and call it Skywatcher and hire Jake Barber, and regurgitate everything from Arrow. I mean, this is what's going on in disclosures. People are being very bamboozled. I just mentioned Jake Barber. He's one of the people that went to Washington, D.C. He testified on a Jesse Michaels podcast that he and his crew went to Washington, D.C. to investigate the whistleblowers, to have them arrested by the FBI or for potential wet works. This was stated publicly. Now this person's running around claiming to be a whistleblower. I find that hilarious.
So being used.
He's the enemy as far as I'm concerned. I mean, this guy stated he went there to get me. And others. And now he has commandeered the conversation. This is simple narrative control by those who have the motive and the money. Heaven forbid we hold people accountable for the crimes against humanity for everything they did up until this point.
Right. Directing energy weapons against citizens, destroying cities with earthquakes.
And or scooping people up from sites and using terms like captive/recruit. Well, which one is it? Are you capturing people? Are you recruiting people? So I think there's a lot of evil going on in the world, and people are trying to paint over it with the topic of UFO activity.
I said I was going to get you out of here a second ago, but
Go right ahead.
I've talked to other MK Ultra whistleblowers, people who said that they were manipulated in this way by the government, members of the military, etc. How big do you think this program is?
Scary big.
And it's continuing.
I agree. Yes. I believe that this whole, what they've learned through the decades of research and development on individuals, they're now applying it to everyone. They learned a lot and now they're utilizing it. And that's the scary thing.
It's just getting bigger. It's not getting smaller. Eric Hecker, thank you so much for your bravery and thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Clayton.
Don't fly out of Denver International Airport.
I have to. I'll let you know when I get back to Alaska.
Thanks.